There is a particular kind of ache that arrives the moment you say yes to something you already know will cost you. It settles quietly in the chest, almost before the word has fully left your mouth. Not regret exactly, something closer to recognition, as if some older part of you saw this coming long before you agreed to it. Why does a single word, so small, so easy to say in the moment, so often become the thing you carry the longest? Why does no feel, for so many people, like the most dangerous word in the entire language? Before we explore this together, subscribe to this channel where we uncover the hidden psychology behind everyday life. Picture a house where love was never quite unconditional, not withheld cruelly, not announced as conditional in so many words, but subtly, consistently tied to behavior. Compliance was rewarded with warmth. Refusal was met with distance, disappointment, or a silence that felt to a child unbearable. You may not remember deciding anything in that house. You only remember learning, quickly and thoroughly, which version of you was allowed to stay close. Carl Jung believed that the earliest relationships of childhood do not simply shape preferences, they shape the entire architecture of the self, laying down patterns so early that by adulthood, they no longer feel like patterns at all. They feel like personality. What if the difficulty you have saying no was never really about the request in front of you, but about a much older fear, formed long before you had the words to name it? Here is the wound worth naming plainly. For many people who struggle to say no, somewhere in childhood, refusal was quietly taught to be dangerous, not through violence necessarily, but through the withdrawal of warmth that followed disagreement, disappointment, or any assertion of a separate, independent want. Why would a child learn this lesson so thoroughly and carry it so far into adulthood? Because a child's survival, in every meaningful sense, depends entirely on connection to the adults around them. If saying no consistently produced distance, disappointment, or emotional withdrawal, the child's nervous system did not conclude that the adult's reaction was unreasonable. It concluded, far more simply and far more permanently, that no itself was unsafe. Consider how this might have looked, in ways so subtle they rarely registered as significant at the time. A parent whose mood visibly darkened at the smallest resistance, a household where compliance was mistaken for good character, and refusal for defiance requiring correction. A caregiver who needed to be agreed with in order to feel secure, so that the child, quite young, learned to manage that need before it could even fully manage its own. Was that love? Or was it a subtle exchange, where affection became the reward for obedience rather than something offered freely regardless? Alfred Adler believed that early experiences of powerlessness often shape a lifelong compensatory strategy, and for many people, saying yes becomes exactly that. Not generosity, not simple kindness, but a quiet, well-practiced strategy for maintaining the connection that once felt so precarious. Is your yes so often actually a preference? Or is it, more honestly, a very old form of self-protection wearing the appearance of generosity? Jung might have called this a wound living inside the shadow, not something shameful, but something unexamined, operating quietly beneath conscious awareness, shaping your adult relationships according to rules written by a much younger version of yourself who had no other options available. And here's the harder question worth sitting with. How many of your adult yeses are actually choices? And how many are simply an old child, still trying to keep the peace in a house that no longer exists? Picture the tree standing bare through winter, appearing from a distance like something finished, without depth. Beneath the surface, unseen, the roots continue their patient widening in the dark. Is recognizing this childhood pattern painful because something is being lost? Or is it painful the way any true growth is painful, the discomfort of something long buried finally being given room to change shape? This is the turn worth making gently here, recognizing this wound is not about blaming a childhood you could not control, nor about excusing yourself entirely from ever having to grow past it. It is about understanding, honestly, why saying no has felt so consistently dangerous, so that you can finally begin practicing it as an adult with far more safety available to you than the child who first learned to fear it. Jung called this long, uneven process individuation, becoming a person whose choices are made freely rather than compulsively, according to rules laid down before you had any say in writing them. It rarely feels graceful at first. It tends to feel, initially, like grief. Only later does it begin to feel like freedom. So what do you do with a fear this old, embedded this deeply into your earliest sense of safety? This is where the observer becomes essential, the quiet witness inside you capable of noticing the old fear rising the moment you consider refusing someone without immediately obeying its outdated instructions. Not the part of you that says yes reflexively, already anxious about the disappointment a no might produce. The part that can simply notice. Calmly, I feel the old fear of losing connection right now, and this fear was accurate once in a house I no longer live in. Seneca often wrote that many of our adult fears are simply childhood fears, unexamined, carried forward long past the circumstances that first justified them. Can you feel the old dread rising at the thought of disappointing someone? And pause there. Distinguishing clearly between the danger that was once real and the safety that is actually available to you now? Can you allow the fear to exist without letting it make the decision for you? And here is something worth noticing. If you look honestly, this pattern has likely repeated itself across many relationships since childhood friendships, romantic partnerships, workplaces, each one, in its own way, echoing the same early lesson about what compliance earns and what refusal costs. Why does life seem to recreate this same test in new rooms with new people until it is finally recognized clearly enough to be answered differently? Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious in us tends to reappear in our lives as pattern the same childhood dynamic, wearing new faces until it is finally understood rather than simply repeated. Perhaps this is not really about the specific request currently sitting in front of you, waiting for an answer. Perhaps it is the newest version of an older question. When did you first learn that your no might cost you the love you needed to survive? And are you finally ready to test whether that is still true? Viktor Frankl believed that between what happens to a person and how they respond, a space exists narrow, but entirely their own. You could not control the household that first taught you to fear refusal, but the space between feeling that old fear rise and choosing deliberately to answer honestly regardless, that space belongs entirely to you. So what would it actually look like to finally practice this gently as an adult? Not something dramatic, not a single sweeping declaration of independence from every obligation at once. It might look like saying no to something small and noticing with some surprise that the disappointment on the other end does not actually destroy the relationship. It might look like sitting with someone's mild frustration at your refusal without immediately rushing to undo it. It might look like choosing your own genuine preference over the automatic yes that has kept you safe, in some form, for most of your life. It might look like recognizing, calmly, that the adults who truly value you can tolerate your no far better than the fear inside you currently believes. None of this arrives with fanfare. Jung once suggested that people will do almost anything to avoid facing the origins of their own fear. And if that is true, then simply naming this childhood wound honestly, rather than continuing to obey it silently, may already be a significant act of courage. Return for a moment to that house where warmth once depended so precisely on compliance. Imagine standing in the doorway now, older, no longer dependent on that particular household for your survival, seeing clearly, perhaps for the first time, that the rules written there were never universal laws. They were simply the terms of one house, one family, one version of love that was never as unconditional as it should have been. Does that make the fear disappear instantly? Not necessarily. But does it mean the fear no longer has to be obeyed automatically? Perhaps. Finally, yes. And so we return to the question beneath every automatic yes, every swallowed refusal, every small piece of yourself quietly surrendered to preserve a connection that once felt essential to survival. What actually remains of you once you are no longer negotiating for love the way a frightened child once had to? What remains when your worth no longer depends on your compliance? Jung offered an answer that has outlasted him by nearly a century. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Perhaps the child who first learned to fear the word no was never wrong to be afraid, given the house they were standing in at the time. But perhaps the adult you have become is finally standing somewhere safer, with far more room than that child ever had to practice a word that was never actually dangerous to begin with. If this resonated, subscribe to this channel and join us as we keep uncovering these hidden truths. What is one place in your life where you are learning, finally, to say no? Write it in the comments below and let that old fear, wherever it still lives in you, finally rest.